Welcome to Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons, the podcast where we cut through the noise and share strategies that actually drive customer-led growth. Each week, we bring you straight-talking conversations on adoption, retention, expansion, and everything in between. Let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons. I'm Jason Noble here over in London, and my partner in crime, Jason Whitehead, over in the States. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason.
We've got a slightly different type of episode today. It's not a guest one, it's just the two Jasons talking. And we're going to dig into really what is probably one of the biggest and quite often overlooked drivers of B2B SaaS growth, and also it can be one of the biggest challenges if it's not done right. And that's the topic of customer adoption, what that really means. What we're going to do, normal format, we'll just talk to each other with some questions, but we've also got a very special person, none other than Jason Whitehead, who's really spent most of his own career digging into what helps organizations really get value from their technology. And he's been doing some amazing work years back in his early days of his career, all around adoption, and also with what he's done at Success Chain and their new Adopt Chain program, really looking on what customer adoption, platform adoption program is all about. So a slightly different type of episode, but I think one that, as I said, is really, really important to dig into. Jason, start us off. This is a topic you know very well. Talk us through kind of why did you come into challenges with this? What brought you into this? And also what you see as some of the big challenges today?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jason. I'm excited about this episode because, we've done the podcast now for over 100 episodes, and we really don't deep dive into both of our collective experiences explicitly as much. And I think this will be fun for people to get to know us a little bit better, or get to know me a little bit better, my background, and in the future, maybe we'll do an episode about you. But but just as some context, so I came up out of the world of IT consulting, big CRM implementations for Fortune 500 customers. And, previous to when I got into that, I had gone and did a master's in information system just down the road from you in London. So that's how I first fell in love with London. And then after working in consulting for a few years, I got hired by a division of Texas Instruments here in the DC area. And it was a really phenomenal piece. And what happened is they had bought a CRM system, turned it on, went live, and it was a disaster. Nothing was mapped to business process. Everyone had access to all the admin screens. The data was a joke, and nothing was fixed. And they hadn't solved their business problem. So they actually created a new position, and I got hired into it. My boss said, I don't necessarily know what you need to do. Go figure it out, which I did. And so I went through the usual IT implementation process, cleaned it all up, got a really nice, clean, neat, orderly system mapped to business process, did all the tricks of the trade. And what was different this time is my boss came to me and said, Jason, it's great you've got it up and running, but if we can't get people to use the system and we can't prove value to the executives, we don't need it and we don't need you. So you need to go figure that out. And it was pretty blunt. And he was very direct. And, this is back in the year 2000. So this is, 25 years ago, before customer success was even a thing. But he really defined success for my job and my role in terms of creating business value that they could measure and see and getting everyone to adopt new ways of working. So that was the first thing that really shifted my thinking away from the technology to how do we get people to use it and create value. And then what came from that was I realized nothing in my career had prepared me for that. I had no clue how to deal with that. I didn't know how to deal with the people side of change. I didn't, other than training and all the usual stuff that you do, I didn't know what the hell to do. And fortunately, the company had a really generous tuition reimbursement program. So I was able to go back to university nights and weekends and got another master's in organization development and human resources. So I would learn techniques for actually driving adoption, actually driving behavior change, organizational change. And I'd learn those in my class at night and weekend. And then I'd go into school and apply what I learned, or go into work and apply what I learned. And it had a huge impact. And so I realized for me that where I really wanted to take my career and what I was most excited about was how do we actually get people to embrace technology, change they work, not just at one individual, but collectively across the team, the department, the organization, for the sake of getting everyone to really take advantage of the technology and reap those business benefits that they were after. And it became such a great thing. So that's when after I decided to leave Texas Instruments, I started my own company, focused initially just on user adoption and helping companies put in more effective plans than your traditional change management, which usually stopped at go live, to say, how do we make sure year over year, as the systems change, as the people change, that we're going to keep getting value from this? And what do we do? So that's sort of how I got into this field and why I'm so excited and passionate about this topic.
Do you see? I mean, it's a fascinating journey, and I really say
Mm-hmm.
you were focused on this 25 years ago. I I'd almost say that we're having many of these same problems again, and maybe these big challenges happen at big technology inflection points, and with AI now, is it a
Mm-hmm.
big start again where we've got this problem again? I don't know, because I still think even going back 10, 15 years, this
Yeah.
adoption thing is critical. And we did another podcast, didn't we, where we talked about change management, and you've
Mm-hmm.
got it's the users need to be successful, the buyers need to be successful, the company does, and you, as in the world of customer success, you're dealing with all of these different personas that you need to make successful, and how they adopt the technology is different. So I find it fascinating that there isn't the focus put on this that there needs to be, because no technology platform works unless it's adopted properly. And there's always a change piece a part of, or there's always a change piece as part of that. And
Right.
I think the challenge we've got in technology today is that it's almost, and getting even worse, if I can say that, but it's continuous change. And
Absolutely.
are we as humans okay with that? I think naturally people don't like change. I think if you work in technology, you become not immune to it, but more resilient to change, and you work with it. But is the pace of change too much for what we're designed for? Is this problem going to get worse? I mean, what
Mm-hmm.
talk us through kind of how you've seen
Yeah.
it change over your time at Texas Instrument when you built your own first company, and now what you guys are doing at Success Chain and with Adopt Chain. How have things changed? How has adoption
Yeah.
changed over that period?
It's evolved so much, and yet there are many things that haven't changed at all. So there's certain parts that are really different. I think one of the first things is few organizations understand that, the technology is going to do what the technology does. It's what the people do with it that makes the difference. And when, I often talk to a software vendor and say, why is it some customers are really effective with your system and others struggle? And I'm like, the technology is the same, the training's the same, the documentation, the support. What's different is the people in the environment in which they're in the context in which they're working. And those are the issues that are really the wild factors. And then when you talk with a lot of tech folks, especially like a company, if the founder was a techie and really into building the application, they get a lot of pride in their application. And it's often a great application, but they always have a little bit of blinders on what it takes to get people to shift their ways of working. And when I look at technology through the human lens, it's all about changing behaviors, changing habits in mass, and not just one person, and getting everyone to work different. So some easy examples. You're implementing a CRM system, and I did this with a client just a few months ago. I need people to stop sending emails. I need people to put everything in the CRM and app mention in the CRM so that we have a historical record. And when there's turnover or when someone's out, we can see what's going on. Just getting people out of the email addiction into I'm going to write the same thing, but I'm going to do it in a different tool in a different place and then have the CRM notify someone that, oh, go check this out. That's a huge lift. But in terms of what you were talking about, I think one of the things, like when I look back at the days of on-premise before Salesforce, it used to be a couple things. The software vendors they would get paid right up front for their system. They'd get their millions of dollars and just have a really small license fee. So to be honest, they didn't care if the customer used it or not. It was the customer's problem. They bought it was their issue. And a lot of those implementations, there'd be one, maybe two big releases a year. So it was a series of changes, but they were like, okay, the chain's over. Here's the new way, and now I'm good to go. I don't need to think about my process. And for the end users, okay, I've got the new screens, the new fields. All right, this is what I do now, but I've sort of forgotten the old ways after a little bit, and that's okay. But when you move into the world of SaaS, and where SaaS is competing on features coming out all the time, and it's, hey, we're doing agile, we're doing a new release every month, and they may be small incremental releases, and then there's a big one. You never know what you're going to get, but it's really turned for users the learning curve into a learning treadmill, and it is constant in. And there's not a lot of focus on what's the best way to apply this in our organization. What do we need to do to get the value from this new functionality that came out? And a lot of times the software vendor just sort of springs it on their customers. Oh, I had no idea this was coming, and it worked differently yesterday, and today it's unique. So what I talk about now, and I think we'll see this even more with AI, is the pace of technology evolution. The systems can change faster than the people and organizations can keep up with it. And a lot of folks don't really have their eye on what does it take to bring the organizations and the people and the process evolution to keep pace with the technology. And they don't put in place the structures and the process and the people, and they don't have the expertise. So at some point, it all goes to shit and it all sort of collapses down that, okay, well, now we've got this system and we're still doing a process that hasn't kept up and haven't evolved. The data is all garbage. We're not able to use the automations. We're not able to use the analytics because everything hasn't kept up, and it all starts to fall down. So it's a huge challenge.
It's fascinating as well, because I know I've said before that actually us as consumers in the B2C space, adoption's far less of a problem. And
Mm-hmm.
I've part of me has always thought, well, is that because the applications are slicker, the UI is easier? But I think you've hit on a really key thing here, and the answer is no. It's not like if I'm trying to adopt a new service at home, media stream, whatever it is, it's me, maybe my wife, maybe my kids,
Yeah.
and we all probably think about the same. I'm not an organization where everybody is quite different.
Right.
I don't have someone else that's made the decision to buy it. Well, maybe if I'm the dad and I bought it for my kids and they're not using it,
Right.
I get a bit annoyed. But I think it's less of a problem in B2C. But I think the other thing, and you hit on this earlier on, but in B2B, I mean, what makes adoption such a big growth driver for SaaS? Why is it so important? What's the big driver? If we get
Mm-hmm.
adoption properly done well, how does it help be that hidden growth lever that you want for SaaS versus if we don't do it? What's the real meat
Yeah.
to that? Why is it so important?
I think what people forget is that adopt effective user adoption at scale across your customer is on the critical path to them achieving value and them getting the business results that they want. And if they don't achieve value and get the business results, they're not going to renew, they're not going to expand. And so you don't focus on adoption for the sake of adoption. You focus on it because if we don't get this, everything that we really want isn't going to happen. And so, it's kind of like I'd almost put it in the same piece. Like if the system didn't have the data that we need, it's no use to us. If it didn't have the automations that we need, it's of no use to us. And if you don't have adoption, it's still of no use to you. So you really need to think through what does this look like. But the point that you hit too, differences between B2B and B2C. B2C, if I'm looking Facebook, Netflix, the tickety talks, all the stuff that I'm going to be doing on my phone, whatever that's going to be, I'm organized around how I prefer to work and what's going to bring me joy or pleasure, save me time. With B2B SaaS technology, it's not about individual medley. It's about how do I get large groups of people that may be working in different departments that have different incentives and goals and have at different stages of their life. Some people are new to their career. Some people are going to retire in 6 months. How do you get all these folks to organize and play well together and be as effective as they can as a team, as a whole, using this underlying thread of technology? So the technology is just an enabler. What you're really after is the behavior change and the alignment that leads, the whole to be bigger than the sum of its parts.
That's fascinating because I remember the first conference that you and I
Mhm.
met but didn't meet at back in what 2018. The talk I did then was about, at the time it was all about tech level customer success,
Yeah.
tech touch, and we said back then it's not about tech touch, it's about technology enabled. So
Yeah.
technology is always been, it's an enabler for us to be successful. And in the context of what we're talking about now, that us is not just me, it's not just the two of us, it's a company, it's a group of people, it's a legal
Yeah.
entity, it's a company to be successful. So it's a lot bigger. Where do you, in some of the challenges that you've seen, where are most SaaS companies going wrong with adoption then? What's the biggest problem?
Wow, it's hard to pick a favorite because there's a lot in there and it varies from groups to group. Um, Starting at the high level and working down, most of them don't really have expertise in what adoption methodologies and activities are and how to engage groups in mass around that, and what are the right things to change behavior. And an easy example would be if you're trying to get people to adopt new ways of conducting meetings or new ways of collaborating or whatever it's going to be without any change of technology, just getting them to change their behavior and how they work together, where you're not training someone on a system. What would you do to facilitate that change? And if you don't have a good answer to that, because that's really about changing ways of working, you're going to really struggle when you say, now we need to layer in this component of adoption or technology. And when I go in, I meet with folks and I ask about their experience with change and adoption. If I'm at a networking event, it's usually a very pedestrian level piece of, oh, well, we've got to train people on the product. We've got to tell them what's in it for me and how they're going to benefit and how it's going to make their lives easier. And if we just do that, we'll get it. And there's so much more that needs to be involved. So that's one thing is in most SaaS vendors, a lot of well-intentioned folks, but if you take away the, hey, you can't train them on the product, they've already mastered the product training. You've already communicated out what's in it for me and you're still not having adoption. What do you do next? If you don't have a good answer to that, or if you're not confident enough in the tech activities and techniques to say, I'm going to put an adoption plan that's going to carry us for the next 3 years through the go live, through releases, through updates. If you can't structure that, you probably don't have the expertise that you need. So that's the first thing. Another thing I see, they start way too late with adoption activities. Many times it's an afterthought. We're going to train you on the product. We're going to get the tech folks together. We're going to load up the data. We're going to train the trainer, whatever that needs to be. And so they've already started well after the implementation's down road. I actually say you need to start this during the sales process. And your sales and marketing folks, they're often trying to talk about business. They're now trying to talk about business outcomes, but then they really come back to feature and function and let me do a demo and let me do this, let me do that. And they may say, and this is where you get to that outcome that you're looking for. What they're not doing is talking with customers about what change and adoption efforts are required. And some simple things that you can do there is even just ask your prospect, tell me about the other systems you've implemented before. What level of success have you had getting people to adopt that technology? How much of the business outcomes you were expecting do you actually achieve? Tell me about your internal capabilities around change and adoption. Do you have available staff to work on this project? Do you have a methodology? Do you have expertise that has proven effective? And if the answer is no to all those questions, one, they're already a churn risk. So you may get the initial sale, but they're going to struggle with adoption and disappointment all the way through. And two, just if they say, oh, we really struggle with that, the question becomes, well, why is it going to be different now? Why is it going to be different when they're trying to implement and adopt our product? If they haven't been able to do it before and suddenly just our features are so much better, our UI is so much better, there's got to be a different answer. But also, and then the last thing about that, when you start during the sales process, that actually starts the change process on the customer side. They're now thinking about this. They're now thinking, oh, we're going to have a problem whether I go with this vendor or any vendor, that this is going to be other issues. What do I need to do and how do I make sure this is successful? So that's one of the things, even just starting earlier.
Do you see, I mean, the risk of this, because we always say customer success should start in the sales cycle, and this feels an overlap part of that, absolutely critical. But is there a risk that purely from a sales point of view, that your sales team might push back, saying, no, this is going to delay it? If you suddenly speak to a customer or a prospect and start talking about change management and they haven't really thought about it at the right level before, does it delay the sales process? Maybe quite rightly, but is there a risk there? Do you see any internal, or have you seen internal pushback from the own commercial teams in the vendor saying this is going to slow things down? The other question I'd ask you is, very separate to this, is a lot of people would see adoption as it's just training. So
right.
talk to us at the second part of the question, and talk a bit more about what is an adoption program. Because it's not a term that many people know about.
It's really not. And there's a lot that you layer into it. But to your first point, though, actually, I think in terms of delaying a sale, if you do it right and if you have a effective approach to addressing adoption during the sales process, it can actually accelerate your sale and de-risk it for your customer. And here's why. When you're going through and you start to ask the customer and you're surfacing these issues, you're highlighting for them that they need to do more than just get the system live, but you back it up with, and it's not just our system that you do this with, it'll be any other system that you have. So this is a change and adoption issue, regardless of which technology you go for. The difference is, are your other vendors even talking about this? Do they understand it? And then if you actually say, and we have a solid program to help you adopt the system, measure value, achieve value, and support you all the way through, because we're not just interested in selling you software, we're interested in you achieving the business outcomes that you're after. And here's how we're going to get you there. When you have a clear path that they can move to that is reliable, and as you prove it with your other customers, now you've got a track record of delivering customer outcomes as opposed to delivering customer promises. And that, I've been on the buyer side of software. It's very risky, especially if it's a multi-million dollar software sale that you're or software purchase. As the executive, it's very risky for you, for your reputation, for the success of your company, for the money that they're putting into it, for the resources you have to have at it, and anything that your vendor can do to de-risk that piece and say, here's the other resources we bring, here's the methodology we bring that our other competitors don't have. That's a huge differentiator for you and can build confidence in the prospect. So that's the first piece I'd throw to that. And actually, just I worked on one client. A lot of my work is working with SaaS vendors. The other half of my business is working with the buyers of software on their internal adoption projects. And we had one vendor doing a very large, $40+ million CRM investment. They brought us in to help with their adoption program and strategy 6 months before they even selected the vendor. We were part of that vendor selection process, and we were highlighting for them all the way through. Here's what we're seeing based on your current processes and what they're offering from a technology and a services perspective. This vendor's a little bit more reliable. This one's going to be more at risk, and here's where you need to go. But that customer noticed that getting adoption has always been their Achilles heel, and getting outcomes has always been their problem. And they can't afford, when they're spending $40 million, to have that big of a mistake again.
It is that the more you look at this, and this has been a really, even for me, Jason, I've known you for 7 years now, but even, and we've talked about this before, but the fact that it's still such a big problem, and it's probably one of the biggest challenges,
right?
And why isn't as much time spent on it as there should be? Let's shift it now. Then I'd love to hear, because I know, as you say, you've done this working at a customer, a buying customer. You've done this as part of your career. You've built companies, but tell us about the solution. You guys set up Success Chain 6 years ago. What's AdoptChain? What have you built with it? How does that then help SaaS vendors? And just expand on, not so much a pitch, but just
right. How does it work and why?
Expand. What does the program look like? Because I think it is this idea of an adoption program is fascinating, and it's not talked about enough.
It really is. And even before Success Chain, when I started my previous company, Tritons, that was in 2006, focusing on adoption. So I've been doing this for over 20 years now. The first part, when we look at this, since I work with buyers of software and software vendors, there's a lot of disconnect still between what their needs are and how they go about addressing them, what they talk about, and there's still some pretty big gaps there. And we came up with AdoptChain to try and fill that gap. And essentially, we looked at what's missing from these groups. So when we look at the software vendor, even from the very beginning, they lack expertise in change management and adoption and how to effectively address that. So they may talk about at a high level, but really what they're coming back to is product training. And so they don't have the skills as a customer success person, as an implementation person, to say, this is going to be an effective customer adoption effort. This is going to be an ineffective one. Here's how I can lead them. Here's how I can guide them. And if they've never done that work, how can they, with confidence, go and direct their customers to be successful and to take the actions the customers wouldn't take on their own? So we work with both of those groups, and we provide them some education and some support. So a crux of our program is we have an e-learning that we built called Master Proactive Software User Adoption Strategies that goes through user adoption processes and methodologies. Yeah, it's great. It's really just rolls off the tongue, but it captures the heart of what it is.
Yep.
In the first part, we educate people about adoption issues and the methodologies. Like, for example, most companies don't realize that they're pretty much in every organization, there are certain organizational barriers that prevent people from adopting your system, even if they want to. And if you don't have someone in here who it's their job to identify those and remove them, and if they don't know what to look for, say, this is what's going to trip us up. If you don't have a process to do that, you're going to be in trouble. So that's one of the things that's covered in that methodology. So training up your internal customer success, your internal implementation team, even your sales and marketing team, so that they can all be focused on what does it really take for customers to be effective. And then the next piece, we make this same course available to all of your customers. And the way we've structured it is, as part of your customer education onboarding, you're going to start talking about it during the sales process. But as soon as they sign on the dotted line, one of the very first things you do is you go and educate your customers, their executive, their project manager, their subject matter experts, whoever's involved in the implementation and making sure it's used and successful. Give them the tools and education they need. And that's more of a teach a man to fish approach. And if they don't have this, and most of them don't, they're going to struggle to begin with. But once you start to give them some education, they have more confidence about where to go and what to do. So that's the second part. Third part, the customer and the vendor, the CS team, they need to do some joint adoption planning. And we have some tools and methodology in there to say, okay, Now you're talking the same language. Define what your outcomes, business outcomes you're looking for. Define the actions that are going to get there that prove you're on track. Identify the barriers and how you're going to remove them, and identify the resources the vendor can help provide to make all this easier. And so that gets everyone in line. But what it also does, and this is my favorite part for a software vendor, by doing that upfront early and getting your customer to agree, this is how we're going to measure success and when we're going to do it. They've already told you from day one, what is your renewal criteria? What are the marks you need to hit? So there should be no confusion down the road. This is what it's going to take, and here's how we can have that more effective QBR and renewal discussion.
It does that. There's so much overlap between,
yeah.
I mean, as we said earlier on, it's a fundamental piece of customer success, as we call it. And these are these are conversations you need in the sales cycle up front. What's going to make this successful? But this really puts that emphasis on get this bit at the beginning done right, and it's a lot more than just training. We did another podcast about called educational needs, and that's very different. Again, education for technology goes far beyond training, and I think this is such an important discussion. I think a lot of SaaS leaders listening, a lot of our listeners will realize that adoption is really it's one of the fundamental building blocks of your growth strategy. And I think it's really cool. I think this has been a great discussion, Jason, and I think really highlighting, not just how you guys are coming in to help this, but it's just what you've built with AdopChain. I think it's a really powerful mechanism. And we'll include links in the show notes, really, that talks you through this. How do you accelerate adoption growth? But I think it's a great thing to dig into, because there's not enough time spent on this.
There really is. And I won't go into it now. There is more to the program, because getting the initial adoption during that critical go live for the first 12 months is critical. But then how do you keep it going year after year? Your product's going to change. There'll be new features. Your staff's going to turn over. Executive sponsors and administrators and project managers are all going to leave. And you need to make sure the people that are coming up after them continue to adopt. And you need to keep adoption and value creation top of mind over the customer lifecycle. And if you're interested in learning how we do that more, I'd encourage folks, come to our website, come to an AdopChain information session. Happy to walk you through it all. And the approach that we're taking is something that folks can build for themselves. They absolutely could, if they have the expertise and the time to do that. So we want to go through and educate folks both about the need to focus on adoption and the recognition that what most folks do today isn't effective. Like product training, it's necessary, but not sufficient. There's more that needs to be done. And we want to see folks be successful, because there's nothing better than when someone actually embraces your application and it's like, oh my God, my job is so much easier now. Or we as a team are so much more effective. I wish we had this 6 months ago. And when you start to have those conversations, it's such a rush. It really is.
I think it is. And when that value is so apparent to everyone that's using the organization. Jason, this has been great. And thanks everyone for tuning in to Breakthrough SaaS Growth. If you found this episode useful, please do share it with your team, your peers, and let us help more SaaS companies build customers for life.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons. If you found today's episode useful, make sure you subscribe, check out our website at breakthroughsaasgrowth.com, and follow us on all the usual social media channels for more insights and updates. And don't forget to share the show with your colleagues who are driving growth in SaaS. See you next time.